Chad Daybell, a gravedigger and religious author, married Tammy Daybell in 1990. The couple had 5 children and were living in Rexburg, Idaho in 2018 when Chad went to a Doomsday prepper conference in St. George, Utah to sell books and speak about his visions and beliefs. That's where he met Lori Vallow, and the Doomsday couple's affair began. Over the course of the next 2 years, chaos followed them. Lori's husband, Charles Vallow, was shot and killed by her brother, Alex. Chad's wife, Tammy, was found dead under suspicious circumstances. Then Lori's young children, Tylee and JJ, were reported missing, and a national search began. Lori's brother, Alex, was found dead on the toilet, and in the middle of all of it, Chad and Lori made their way to Hawaii for their wedding. And in June of 2020, the search for JJ and Tylee was over when their remains were discovered on the property of the former gravedigger, Chad Daybell. Lori Vallow Daybell has already been convicted for her role in the deaths of her children and Chad's wife, Tammy. Now that Chad's trial has come to an end and his fate is in the hands of the jury, will this so-called doomsday prophet foresee what they will decide? Good evening and welcome to Closing Arguments. I'm Julia Janae, filling in tonight for Vinnie Politan, who's on assignment for his other show, Accomplice to Murder. Tonight we are going to begin in Boise, Idaho, where we are in a verdict watch right now in the trial of the so-called doomsday prophet Chad Daybell. 1 hour and 29 minutes is on the clock. Many of you may remember that this all started in the winter of 2019 with a search for 2 missing children, JJ Vallow and Tylee Ryan. And that is investigation into their disappearances eventually led investigators to look into some other suspicious events, like the death of Charles Vallow. It was initially deemed a shooting in self-defense, but it was later reopened as a homicide investigation. And the attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreaux would then be linked to Chad and Lori. And the circumstances around the death of Tammy Daybell caused investigators so much concern, they dug her body up. It was exhumed and re-examined, and when the remains of the children were found, Chad and Lori were charged with murder. All of the evidence was presented in Lori's trial last year in Idaho, and as you know, she was found guilty for her part in the deaths of not only Tylee and JJ, but also Tammy. She is awaiting trial now in Arizona related to Brandon Boudreaux and Charles Vallow, and now it's time for the jury to decide if the evidence also points to Chad Daybell. Court TV legal correspondent Kelly Craft is on the ground there at the courthouse where all of this is unfolding in Boise, Idaho. Kelly Craft, thank you so much for joining us and revealing to us what we've seen today. Closing arguments happened in front of this jury. What were your takeaways from that state closing argument?
Well, good evening to you, Julia. Right here behind me in Boise, Idaho, inside the courthouse, jurors, 5 women, 7 men. They are deliberating as we speak. It was about 6:30 p.m. Eastern in which they went back and began their deliberations. This was after the closing arguments by the state as well as defense counsel. And so why don't we start, as you mentioned, talking about the state's closing argument. So the state discussed knowledge, Chad Daybell, making it appear, according to their theory, that he is the mastermind behind this. He is the one that is telling Lori and Alex Cox and Melanie Gibb and anybody else, Zulema Pastenis, what the death percentages of people were. And the state said when Chad Daybell said that someone was close to a certain death percentage, that would mean, according to the state's theory, that someone then would have to die. So how the state began its closing argument, the state played a phone call in which Chad Daybell is telling Lori is sitting behind bars at this moment. Chad Daybell is telling Lori they are searching the property. And then the state had this to say. Why don't we go ahead and listen?
3 dead bodies on the defendant Chad Daybell's property and or in the residence. 2 of them children. His mistress's kids. Joshua Jackson Vallow and Tylee Ryan were found buried in the defendant's backyard. Tammy Daybell was found dead in their marital bed. And for what? Money, power, and sex. That's what the defendant cared about.
The state put up a timeline in which it showed Charles Vallow first. Then it showed Tylee Ryan, then J.J. Vallow, then Tammy Daybell, just explaining to jurors the sequence of the events and how people died and in what order. This is what the state had to say about little J.J. Vallow. Let's listen.
As they dug J.J. up, they noticed a round object covered in black. One of the investigators there cut the black plastic to reveal white plastic. They cut the white plastic and brown human hair came through. They'd finally found JJ. JJ had been buried with his arms duct taped together, the duct tape running around from elbow to elbow. He had duct tape over his mouth. He had a plastic bag over his head, tape over that plastic bag, and then he was placed in black garbage bags and discarded. That's how JJ was found. Chad labeled him dark. Chad said his death percentage was at 0. Chad said the plan was for he and Lori to be together unencumbered by earthly relatives, earthly obstacles. Chad said those things. And Alex believed Chad 100%.
The state said, Julia, that this case is about sex, power, and money, and talked about a moment in which Chad is texting Lori and put up that text for the jurors saying that it was his greatest hope and dream to be with Lori Vallow. Julia?
Yeah, that money, sex, power was a familiar theme. We heard that during Lori Vallow Daybell's trial, but we heard something different from the defense than we heard from Lori's defense today from John Pryor, and some things that I didn't expect to come out during that closing. What stood out to you?
And I agree with you, Julia, and I think a lot of people felt that way inside the courtroom. So when the state was delivering its closing argument, it felt as if the courtroom was so quiet. Everyone was just listening, and it was a very somber mood at times, family members consoling one another over some of the things that the state was talking about and the photos they were showing. When the defense counsel, John Pryor, got up there, he really would increase his voice at times, talking about the fact and pointing to his client, Chad Daybell, and saying the target was Chad Daybell. So that was interesting to hear, and also just talking about how Lori Vallow Daybell, emphasizing the fact about 5 husbands, so she had been married several times, Chad Daybell going to be her 5th husband, and this was her plan all along, to set him up to have children buried in his backyard, and then eventually, it seems, maybe collect a life insurance policy from Chad Daybell as well. Why don't we go ahead and listen to some of John Pryor's closing?
The next victim. Husband number 5. Number 5. Just get insurance. Don't worry about saying there's any kids or any beneficiaries or anything like that. Honey, just say it's me and you. And while all of this is going on, all of this is happening, Chad's really good friend, Alex Cox, really close friend, is Googling how to put a bullet through the windshield in the side of a black Dodge Dakota that Chad Daybell primarily drives. The target was not Tammy Daybell. It was not Tammy Daybell. You heard testimony about the insurance. The target was not Tammy Daybell.
And John Pryor also talked a lot about Alex Cox, pointing the finger at everyone else. We heard the names David Warwick, Melanie Gibb, pointing the finger at everyone else besides Chad Daybell. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Alex Cox murdered Tylee Ryan. Lori Vallow knew what was going on because her beloved little brother, her beloved big brother, could be tagged for the murder of Charles Vallow, and those 2 kids saw it. And Alex Cox took the body after he murdered Tylee Ryan. He took it out somewhere and he burned the body. And while out in the middle of Fremont County or Madison County or wherever he went, where there are thousands and thousands of acres of open ground, Yellowstone Park is just a short way away, folks. This is a wildlife heaven for hunters. Great place for hunters. The body was burned, it was subjected to a carnivore bite, and then it was put in the ground. And on September 9th, Alex Cox was on Chad Daybell's property, at least part of the time.
As John Pryor was delivering his closing argument, I noticed that Chad Daybell was really leaning in at defense counsel's table, just listening to his attorney try and make this argument that, again, he, Chad Daybell, was the target. Some other takeaways from inside the courtroom. At one point during John Pryor's closing, a box of Kleenex was sent around by one of the guards, actually, to some of the people. And then also it did appear that someone either stormed out of the courtroom during the closing or just left very abruptly and made a loud noise, a loud exit. Now, that could have just been because they were making a loud exit or they were not happy with what John Pryor was saying during the closing. Julia?
Calling Chad Daybell the next victim. That was a moment inside the courtroom for those of us watching it, Kelly. Who knows how that felt for those people who knew these victims, who were close to Tammy, close to JJ and Tylee. And I know, speaking of, you have talked to JJ Vallow's grandfather, who has been there inside of the courtroom day in, day out, was there for Lori's trial. What did he have to say today?
And Julie, we caught up with him right after the state delivered its closing argument, and he was talking about some moments that he really wanted to hear from the state in this case. And we also asked him about becoming emotional at a time when the state was talking about how little JJ, his grandson, was found buried on Chad Daybell's property. Let's go ahead and listen to a bit of that interview.
Lindsay Blake is just absolutely amazing. I think she done a tremendous job. She pinpointed every piece of evidence. She was very factual. Everything she said was documented, and I think she did an amazing job. Anything
stick out to you in particular from the state's closing?
Well, obviously, when Lindsay covered JJ, that hurt me more than anything. Hurt Kay. It hurt our friends, our family.
Larry, during that time, I did notice you were leaning over and Kay was comforting you.
I had to. I was getting too emotional. And so I don't want to influence anybody. And I never intended for that to happen, but it just simply happens. But a lot of great evidence. I think the thing that has solidified my belief that Chad is guilty is when he sat in the back of the patrol car and said, "I'm not coming back home." That was unsolicited. He had not been read any rights, his personal rights. It was just simply, I think, a Freudian slip. And I think the truth came out that moment.
Stuff just saying, "Will you help me? My mom died. I'm pretty sure. Will you help me? My dad's in jail."
I'm not coming back. So all that stuff that's in the baby room is Lori's and mine. Take that mattress from upstairs, I guess. Do what you want. Put the books back on the shelf. We're going to make it through.
And that's Chad Daybell sitting inside a patrol car as investigators are searching his property. He's speaking with his daughter, Emma Murray. That's her married last name. Now she took the stand, testifying for the defense in this case, taking responsibility for a lot of the things that the state was saying that Chad Daybell did, in particular, doing that Google search on the day that Tylee Ryan was burned and buried on Chad Daybell's yard. This would be the Google search the day prior. She said she did that Google search, searching for the wind direction because there was an event coming up and she wanted to know about the wind direction.
And as Chad Daybell said to her there at the end of that surveillance camera that captured them, that he wasn't going to be back. We'll see if the jury decides something different than him remaining where he is behind bars. Kelly, let me ask you this before we let you go. The jury, we know they're deliberating. An hour and 43 minutes is what we have on our verdict watch clock. What's the logistics of how it's going to unfold? Are they sequestered? Are they going to stop at a certain time? Can they go all night?
The Judge Boyce, has said they can keep deliberating as long as they want. They are sequestered in this case. And so how long they will decide to go tonight, we'll have to wait and see. A lot of us were talking right after, as soon as the state was delivering its rebuttal argument, thinking that maybe Judge Boyce would possibly send them home for the night and we would begin deliberations tomorrow. But that is not the case. They were sent right into deliberations and will be here as long as it takes or until they want to go home for the night. And then we'd be back out here tomorrow if they do not reach a verdict tonight. But of course, if they reach a verdict tonight, we'll bring it to you.
Kelly Craft with all of the latest from Boise, Idaho, and I know you will let us know. We'll break into programming if we need to, if there's a verdict or a question. We do have to take a break, but when we come back, we're looking at the death of Tammy Daybell, probably one of the most evidence that was presented by the state in presenting in this case against Chad Daybell. But first, here's a preview of what we do have coming up in the next hour here on Closing Arguments. In San Diego, California, the jury has reached a verdict in the double murder trial of Ali Abulaban, a TikToker turned killer on trial for the shooting death of his wife and her friend. Abulaban says the shooting was a crime done in the heat of passion, but the prosecution says it was premeditated murder. We'll bring you the verdict.
These are the elements that need to be proven in order for you to find the defendant guilty of voluntary manslaughter instead of murder.
In 2011, Karen Swift returned home from a Halloween party
and was never seen alive again.
Weeks later, her body was found near a cemetery.
The case then went cold for over a decade.
Now, her estranged husband faces trial for her murder.
The couple was going through a bitter breakup.
But did divorce lead David Swift to kill?
The Karen Swift murder trial. Live coverage weekday mornings only on Court TV.
I know I've been told for years that Tammy would pass away at a young age. I had no idea that Lori would even be a part of my life. I just knew that my life had two segments. And that I know Tammy's on a special mission and she's with my kids. She's visited them. There's so much, Melanie, that you just have to have faith. And this is not some sort of master plan. There's no way Lori and I could ever come up with this.
Chad Daybell, speaking there, he told quite a few people that he predicted that his wife of over 20 years, Tammy, would die young, long before she ultimately actually passed away. Now, a question the jurors may be asking themselves is, did Chad's alleged visions just happen to come true? Was he actually a prophet, or did he have a hand in Tammy's death? The state of Idaho says that Tammy Daybell was in excellent health. She was participating in 5K runs. She was clogging. She went to Zumba regularly. And they had person after person come on the stand to say that they were shocked when they learned that the 49-year-old died.
I was just shocked. I was stunned.
Why?
Well, I thought she must have been in a car accident or something had happened, because I don't know why she would pass away. So it was just really shocking.
I was stunned.
Why were you so stunned?
I had seen Tammy 2 weeks prior, and it didn't seem that somebody of her age, in her condition, should have passed.
I was super surprised that she had passed.
Why?
Because she was just so healthy just the day before, and I was just talking to her.
I received a phone call from Chad that morning.
What did he tell you?
He told me that she was really sick and had had a coughing fit and was in the bathroom throwing up around midnight, 1 o'clock.
And then that morning, he woke up when she had fallen out of bed.
Were you surprised by this information?
Absolutely surprised.
Did it make any sense to you?
No, I had just seen her 2 weeks prior to that, and I had no idea that she was so sick that something like that would happen.
When you saw her 2 weeks earlier, how did she appear?
She looked perfectly healthy.
Now, those were all state witnesses, but the first witness for the defense was Chad and Tammy's daughter, Emma Murray. We just heard her voice when we saw that video of a dash cam where Chad is telling her everything's going to be all right and she's going to handle some of the affairs that are getting taken care of while he was being hauled off to jail. She told the jury as a defense witness that her mother's health was in a downward spiral in the weeks leading up to her death in her bed. Now, while the prosecution...
Her health started declining. I was really worried about it. She'd always been one to be able to meet the demands of daily life without being exhausted. And she started going to bed at, like, before dinner some nights. It would be like 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night.
So while the prosecution and the defense have different theories about what killed Tammy Daybell, they do agree that around 2 weeks after Tammy's death, Chad Daybell was off in Hawaii on a beach marrying Lori Vallow. We have some really great guests that are weighing in on this day where we are in a verdict watch there in Boise, Idaho. But our guests are joining us now from San Antonio, Texas. We have Lori Vallow Daybell's cousin, also the author of the book, I Walked Through the Fire to Get Here, the podcast Midlife Revolution. Megan Connor is standing by. Also in St. George, Utah, Lori Vallow's uncle, co-host of the podcast Tylee and JJ's Silver Linings and co-author of the book Lori's Lies and Family Ties, Rex Connor is standing by. And also in Los Angeles, the director of Sins of Our Mother, the Netflix documentary on Lori and Chad Daybell, Sky Borgman, is also with us. Thank you all for joining us on this evening where we are waiting to hear what the verdict will be, if this jury is going to reach a decision. And Megan, I just want to start with you on what your thoughts are now that we have reached the end of this now second trial in the saga of Lori Vallow Daybell, Chad Daybell. Any new thoughts today as we are waiting for the jury to come back?
Well, I'm grateful for all the new information that's come out during this trial. It's answered a lot of questions. And I think, again, the prosecution has done an excellent job. And I realize John Pryor has a job to do. He's doing his best to poke holes in the prosecution and create that reasonable doubt. But hearing his closing argument today, honestly, I felt a little relieved because I don't think he really presented a compelling story.
Rex, what were your thoughts on that closing argument by the defense? I agree with Megan that I think the state did a very strong job. It sounded a lot like Lori Vallow Daybell's trial. John Pryor called Chad Daybell a victim in this case. What was your reaction to that part of the closing?
My reaction, and Megan's so well spoken, she said it well for me too, but my reaction to him personally is that I have very low expectations from him. He doesn't have much to work with. All of the evidence and the truth is against him. He's pulling out all the lawyer tricks he knows, so he's doing his job. And it's unfortunate that someone has to do that job, but he does it, and I'm with Megan on the fact that fortunately he didn't have much to work with.
This was a difficult case. It's going to be, if he's convicted, there's another phase to this case that he will then have to present in front of this jury. But Sky, let me ask you, just based on the closing arguments today, what we learned, you know so much about this case, you studied the background of this case. Was there anything new that came out in the evidence in Chad Daybell's trial that surprised you?
I don't think there was anything that really surprised me. I mean, I think what was most interesting probably is that how the defense sort of handled things. I mean, it was really different than how they handled it in Lori's trial. I mean, they actually sort of came and presented witnesses, and there was a lot to sort of tell the prosecution or try to sway the jury into saying there is an alternative theory here. This is our alternative theory. And to just put that reasonable doubt into the jury's minds, I think, like everybody says, they showed up, they did what they need to do. I personally don't think the jury's going to be deliberating all that long. They may not make a decision tonight, maybe tomorrow, but I think there wasn't that much new information. They've heard it before. They know what's going on, and I think they're going to make a decision pretty quickly.
Yeah, we're right at 2 hours with the jury deliberating, and Kelly said they can go as long as they want tonight. Megan, we were showing that video of Emma Murray, who testified on behalf of her father. And I did find that interesting that during this trial, in comparison to Lori Vallow Daybell's trial, you didn't have defense witnesses, you didn't have her family, anyone from her family really supporting her in any way. Can you speak to just what perhaps Chad Daybell's kids must be going through, or what you think about their position of defending their father when their mother is, what the prosecution says, a victim in this case?
Yeah, I have a lot of compassion for Chad's kids, actually, because I think they probably have fallen prey to a lot of his attempts to give his narrative of the story. And he is the patriarch, the father of the home, and his kids want to believe him. And so I think they're in a really tough position. But listening to Emma, to me, it really sounded like she had her narrative that she was going to present, and she sort of seemed like she was willfully ignorant of plain facts that are right in front of her.
Yeah, even going so far as to saying that she was the reason for some of the bad facts, to really swallow that for the defense, to give them the opportunity to say Chad didn't do these things. Rex, I want to ask you about something that I've heard you talk about before generally, that kind of went along with something that John Pryor said today, where he said that it's not just Charles Vallow that, well, he couldn't go that far in front of this jury, but we know that Lori is facing charges for Charles Vallow's death, but he's saying that she has a pattern, that there were other husbands that she eliminated in order to get money, and that Chad was next. What are your thoughts on this idea that Lori had a pattern and that it went further back than just Charles?
Well, first of all, Julia, since you said I'm kind of aligned with John Pryor, let me make it clear that's not intentional.
I didn't mean aligned. Didn't mean aligned.
I'm not convinced that Lori wasn't involved in the murder of Joseph Ryan, her third husband. I don't have any facts on that. I wish the investigation was still open to see, but certainly that's a possibility. But as far as this particular case with Tammy, Tylee, JJ, Charles, they are co-conspirators. I'm personally convinced they are two people that got together, chose to do evil. They're just evil. And thankfully, they're evil idiots because they left quite a trail of evidence against themselves.
All of that evidence that the prosecution laid out for them. Sky, Rex, and Megan are going to stick around. We have more ahead. What evidence connects Chad Daybell to the deaths of JJ Vallow and Tylee Ryan? We'll take a closer look at that next.
Here's what we can see. There are multiple police officers here. There's at least one canine dog. It looks like there is an area of focus in the backyard. They have set up 3 or 4 blue canopy tents. They have taped off the backyard. That seems to be the area of focus right now.
We're across the field from Chad Daybell's home, and we're going to zoom way in so that you can kind of see where investigators have been outside all day long. Investigators from the Rexburg Police Department, the Fremont County Sheriff's Office, as well as the FBI Evidence Response Team. Now, Rexburg Police did say they're out here serving the search warrant in relation to the case of JJ and Tylee, the kids missing since September, and they confirm they have found human remains on this property.
Shortly after the remains were discovered, Chad Daybell was taken into custody.
and booked into the Fremont County Jail.
We noticed they were having a few bonfires that were kind of out of the ordinary. So they had a big bonfire last fall, and they had 2 or 3 big bonfires this spring.
When I returned to that area, they had already dug down and located what appeared to be a mass of burnt flesh and charred bone. The amount of duct tape that was covering the body.
Okay. Where was that duct tape located?
On the head, arms, and feet.
Welcome back to Closing Arguments. This just into our newsroom. The jury that's been deliberating over the case that involves the death of Tylee Ryan and J.J. Vallow and Tammy Daybell, they have elected to go home for the night. So we've paused our verdict watch clock at 2 hours and 4 minutes. They will return tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern to resume their deliberations. And while we focus on these cases that they're focused on in the deliberation room, these victims that they have to decide whether Chad Daybell had involvement in their deaths. The remains of Tylee Ryan and J.J. Vallow were discovered on Chad Daybell's property. And that happened on June 9th of 2020. It was about 6 months after he married their mother, Lori Vallow Daybell. They were found wrapped in duct tape and trash bags. That's JJ. And the remains of Tylee Ryan were found burned and charred and melted. They had been buried near the Daybell family's pet cemetery. And prosecutors say that Tylee was last seen alive on September 8th, 2019, and that there's 2 pieces of digital evidence that link Chad Daybell to that death, but not only the death, also the burial. And the first was a Google search from Chad's account on September 8th, 2019. Take a listen.
What did you find?
The user of Chad.Daybell looked up what the wind direction was going to be for the following day, which would have been the 9th.
And the second piece of digital evidence was a text message sent from Chad Daybell to his wife, Tammy, on September 9th. Here's what that text message said. He tells his wife, "Well, I've had an interesting morning. I felt I should burn all the limb debris by the fire pit before it got too soaked by the coming storms. While I did so, I spotted a big raccoon along the fence. I hurried, I got my gun, and he was still walking along. I got close enough that one shot did the trick. Now he is buried in our pet cemetery. Fun times." All right, still with us to discuss this case against Chad Daybell, Megan Connor, Rex Connor, and Sky Borgman. Sky, I want to start with you. The case against Chad Daybell in terms of the children. Tell me about if you think there's any challenges there for these jurors as they're looking through that, because as far as the amount of evidence they had that suggested that Tammy Daybell, her death was done at the hands of Chad Daybell, seemed to be more than they had connecting him to the kids' deaths. Your thoughts?
I think you're right. I think that but evidence, there's no smoking gun, so to speak. They were buried in his backyard, which is very deliberate, and it seems to be connected to Chad. But I think that there is still a question of who actually murdered these 2 kids. Was it Alex Cox? Was it Chad? Was it Lori? And I think that that's going to be a big question that the jury deliberates, however long they end up deliberating.
Megan, there's something that the prosecution kept saying, and it almost became a theme. She had several themes in her closing arguments, but she kept saying Alex believed Chad 100%, trying to connect those 2. So if you believe that Alex Cox was the one who was killing all of the people involved in this tragedy, it's connecting the 2 of them. Just how close do you believe they got in terms of Alex believing everything that this so-called prophet was saying?
I think that was spot on. It seemed to be from the communications that we did see from Alex, and especially the blessing that Chad gave Alex, and then Alex's comments to Zulema prior to his death. If Zulema is to be believed, it seemed to me that Alex really did believe everything that Chad was saying, and I think that makes a lot of sense in his actions.
You know, Rex, when I'm thinking about belief and who believed what, it struck me that Lori constantly told Charles about Ned and about being dark and that he was a zombie, and we saw that. This jury didn't see that information, but it's something that she told him. We don't have any evidence that Chad ever told Tammy that she was dark, that she was a zombie, that she was a different person. Do you think that says anything about how truly held the beliefs were basically between Lori and Chad?
I think you're saying it very nicely and politely. The way I would say it is Lori and Chad made, what's a good word, made stuff up in the situation for the situation. So none of it's, to me, none of it's meaningful in the content of what they said. It was all just stuff they were making up to get money, power, and sex.
Money, power, sex, that's the theme that we have heard now. This is the second trial. I want to play something that came out during the trial. It was about the weekend that J.J. Vallow was last seen alive. And Lori's friend Melanie Gibb and David Warwick, they were in Rexburg. They were visiting, and according to their testimony during that visit, Chad and Lori talked about light and dark spirits, possessions, and zombies. Take a listen.
Who was it that would label someone dark or a zombie again?
Chad.
And even, and once someone was labeled a zombie or dark, what was going to happen to their body? As Chad and Lori taught it.
If they could cast the evil spirit out, the body would naturally die.
So if someone was dark or a zombie, they were going to die?
Yes.
Did Lori talk to you about JJ while you were there?
Yes.
What did she tell you?
She told me that the day before I arrived that he became dark.
So previously she'd told you Tylee was dark.
Correct. Yeah.
And now JJ was dark.
Correct.
Did you observe JJ that weekend?
Yes.
Did you observe any behaviors that caused you concern?
No.
And David Warwick told the jury that he had seen JJ the night before they left town. And when he woke up, Lori, to say goodbye, Lori told him that her brother Alex took JJ because he was having a demonic episode.
So I just went to say goodbye to Lori and JJ. And Lori was in the kitchen and she was a little dramatic. And I just said, well, we're leaving. I'd like to say goodbye to JJ. And she said, oh, he was out of control. And I had to have Alex come and get him. She just seemed really talking fast and nervous. Just kind of, when I meant dramatic, she explained that he climbed up on the cabinets in the fridge and got on top of the upper cabinets. She had a picture of Christ on the upper cabinet, and he said that he went up there and pushed that down.
Sky, when we think about these kids, this is what had everyone thinking about this case. That's what got everyone talking about it. You're an award-winning cinematographer, director. You were drawn to this story in order to do this Netflix documentary. Your thoughts on the impact of just the kids and the part of the kids being part of this story that has the entire world really paying attention to this trial?
It's just so devastating, really, because these kids had their entire lives ahead of them. If it wasn't for Kay and Larry Woodcock sort of sounding the alarm that something was wrong, I don't know that we would have been on this track of figuring out exactly what happened to them. And I also think it's Lori Vallow and the fact that a mother could do something. For some reason, we're obsessed with mothers who are terrible to their children. And so Chad is kind of cast in her shadow in a horrible way. But I think these kids, you just look at their faces and there's such incredible kids with their lives ahead of them, and it's devastating that they're not with us anymore.
It's truly devastating. Megan, is there anything that you want to say that you want people to be thinking about while they're waiting for a verdict, while they're watching this trial and just shaking their head at all the details, something that you want them to be thinking about while they wait?
Well, the thing I always try to talk about when speaking about the case is that it's possible for us to have healthier communications as families and in our relationships with everybody around us. And I hope that if there's anything that people take away from this case, it's that things can turn harmful and dark right in front of your face. And it's sometimes hard to see. And I think that if we are more cognizant of toxic behaviors of manipulators, then it's easier for us to catch these things sooner. And I hope that people will have more open conversations with their family members.
Absolutely. Rex, can you weigh in as well, especially from the perspective of being connected family-wise to this? How's your family doing during this, and what are they thinking during this verdict watch for Chad Daybell, knowing that Lori has another trial potentially in Arizona?
Well, frankly, we're a mess. Maybe I'm speaking more for myself than other family members by saying that, but you know, what an ordeal to go through for us. But I have to add to it, this ordeal is worldwide. Anyone that's touched this case is traumatized by the children, as Sky said, by the children being treated like this. And I want to thank Sky for carrying this story. I always like to thank Court TV for carrying this story, and the army of media, because this is one story. It's carried around the world. We're all on the same side. We all want justice for the victims. To me, that's a silver lining of this story, that's such a horrific outcome. But this has united all of us. We're all interested in the outcome of this. We're all interested in the perpetrators, and I hope that the investigations are not over, that they will go on until as the indictment said, any co-conspirators, known or unknown, are brought to justice. And the media has had a big part of that. So thank you.
That is a great way to end it, that there are potentially more investigations and that they shouldn't stop. Anything that is connected to this should be looked into. I want to thank our guests so much for being on tonight. That's all we have time for. Megan Connor, Rex Connor, and Sky Borgman. You all have a good evening.